So we're reading from the Scofield Bible. This is Daniel chapter 2, and we are reading verse 31. And the caption reads, "The dream, the great image. Thou, O king, sawest, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. This image's head was of fine gold. His breasts and his arms are silver, and his belly and his thighs of brass. His legs of iron, his feet part of iron and part of clay. Thou sawest till that a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet that were of iron and clay, and brake them into pieces. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken to pieces together. It became like the chaff of the summer, threshing floors. And the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain and filled the entire earth." So in this section right here, Daniel is interpreting the vision that King Nebuchadnezzar had. And similar to the situation with Joseph, Joseph had this divine power to have visions, to see dreams, but to interpret the dreams that he saw. Okay, and that's what gave him favor in Pharaoh's court when Pharaoh had a vision of a dream that disturbed him, and Joseph was able to properly interpret. So the same scenario happened right here, where King Nebuchadnezzar, none of his men could interpret the dream, and he was going to put them to death. But Daniel was like, "Hey, look, I can interpret the dream. Give me a moment. Let me meditate on it. Essentially, let me consult with Yah and the angels, and I will give you the interpretation." So he came back to King Nebuchadnezzar and gave him the interpretation of the dream. So what I want to do is show a visual of this dream that Daniel saw as an image, and this image is one that is very familiar with many biblical scholars, of the Torah and the Tanakh. And, we've interpreted this vision before on our platforms as well. But I want to just give a review of the interpretation of the vision that he had, and, give a visual of it so you all can, dissect it and be able to, properly interpret it yourself. So when other people ask, you'll be able to intelligently tell them exactly what the vision means, what it represents, and things of that nature. All right. So this is a visual interpretation of the vision that King Nebuchadnezzar had, and that Daniel properly interpreted. Okay. So it said he saw a statue, and it had many different levels of many different materials it was made out of. Okay. The head was made out of gold. Okay, so that represented the kingdom that was currently the dominating force and nation in the dispensation of time. That was the kingdom of Babylon. Okay. And then the next kingdom, which is the next part of the statue, Nebuchadnezzar saw that it had, chest and arms made out of silver. Okay. So this was the next, quote unquote, Gentile nation that had came and had conquered much of the known land at that time, especially Babylon, and that was the Medes and Medo-Persians. Okay, and during that reign, when King Cyrus came to power, he took it upon himself, inspired by a spirit that Yah gave him, to say, what, I'm going to release all the Israelites, all the slaves. And they can go back to their lands, and they can, essentially, for the children of Israel, rebuild the temple again. And that's what happened. Okay. But that happened during this period. All right. The third level, which encompasses the belly and part of the thighs, was made out of bronze. Okay, and this level was ancient Greece, the kingdom of the Greeks, where Alexander, when he conquered the Medo-Persians, he conquered much of Europe, parts of Africa, parts of quote unquote the Middle East area, and the Greeks at that point were in control. Okay, and then the next kingdom after that was the kingdom of Rome, and even though they conquered the Greeks, because of the heavy influence of Hellenism, which was the culture of the Greeks, the Romans adopted many of their traditions, their customs, their belief systems, and it just became, another Greek. But they were officially called ancient Rome. All right, and these make up part of the leg, and that was the vision that he saw of the legs of iron. Okay, then after that, he said he had a vision where he saw the iron split into two legs. Okay, and subsequently, the nation of Rome was split into two parts. Okay, it was two kingdoms of Rome. That's what the two legs represent. And those legs essentially at the feet were mixed with iron and clay. That was the next part of what Nebuchadnezzar saw in the vision. All right, and this part of the body represents Rome that was conquered by the Berbers and all those that came from Europe during the 3rd and 4th century CE. They came and they conquered Rome, but even though they conquered Rome and Rome was no more, there was still an aspect of Rome that continued. Okay, and that was governed by the Roman Catholic Church, and they eventually, 1,000 years later, came back into power. Okay, and they were wounded, but they were healed. Okay, and that was the vision that Nebuchadnezzar saw, and that healing of Rome now was mixed with clay and iron, was this modern day Western European civilization that's founded in Europe, but now it's spread and has become America. Okay, so this Western democracy that's spreading all across the planet today, that's the restored kingdom of Rome. But it's a weak kingdom. It's not what Rome once was. Okay, and as you can see, each level of the statue is like a lesser quote unquote metal that the statue is made out of. And then the final vision that Nebuchadnezzar saw was a rock, a small rock that came and it smote the feet of this quote unquote statue of the Gentiles. And that rock Daniel interpreted as being the kingdom of Yor, coming in this dispensation of time, that was going to smite the kingdom of quote unquote Rome that had been healed, which is the Western world. And at that point, once it's been smitten, the rock would eventually turn into a great mountain and it would encompass the entire globe. Okay, so that was the vision that Nebuchadnezzar saw, and Daniel properly interpreted it. And the vision he saw was of these multiple Gentile nations that would come in a specific succession all the way up until this period of time. And when the smiting stone came, that was going to end the times of the Gentiles. And that's what is taking place now. The kingdom of Yor started off as a small group of individuals coming out of America who were motivated to say, you know what, we are those descendants of the biblical Hebrew Israelites. And the prophecy states that, this dispensation of time, in this captivity, we would wake up and we return back to the promised land, guided by Yor. And we need to do that. And they got up, came together, said, we're going to do this. And they seized the power to define, said, we're going to accomplish this in the name of Yor. And that's what they did. And, they left in 1967. They were in Liberia for about 2.5 to 3 years. And then by 1970, the majority of them that were left landed in the Holy Land. Okay, and from there, we've been growing as a nation. 50 plus years later, we have jurisdictions that have grown throughout the planet. But that's that mighty stone that Nebuchadnezzar saw that was beginning to destroy these modern day, quote unquote, Gentile kingdoms that were the feet on the statue.